and welcome to CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Sachin Prabhat. I'm the Vice President of Consulting at Tiger Analytics, a leading provider of data and AI services. There's a problem that's plaguing the enterprises today. Organizations have amassed lots and lots of data, and yet every time I talk to my customers, right, hear that they can't act with confidence. There's a chasm between data and insights. Today, we'll explore why this gap exists, how to fix it, and what it looks like in practice when it's solved. We have with us Ujjwal Sehgal, Global Head of People Analytics at Mars, and Rachel Belino, HR Data Officer again at Mars, to talk about this very pertinent issue. Ujjwal, Rachel, welcome to the interview. Can you please take a moment to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sachin, and CDO Magazine and the Tiger Analytics team for giving us the opportunity to come in and tell our story at Mars of what we are doing and seeing in this space. My name is Ujjwal Sehgal. I lead the People Analytics function here at Mars, where we are looking at our associate data and solving real-world problems that we see for our business. I'll hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Ujjwal. So thank you again to CDO Magazine and to Tiger Analytics for hosting this podcast. It's a pleasure for us to be here. My name is Rachel Belino. I'm the HR Data Officer that runs a team called P&O Data Office within Mars, within the People Analytics function. So just a little bit more about what my team does, because in some analytics functions, you may not find my team. So I think it's interesting to know exactly what we do. So we have a global remit and we cover 4 broad areas. One is data quality, the other is data security, the third is data privacy, and then a large area that I hope we're going to get into in this conversation called data enablement, which covers data governance on our analytics data platform, as well as the data platform itself, which is where we bring people analytics to life at scale, including the data engineering and all of the processes and technology that go along with that. So again, a pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Again, great to have you guys. So let me start with you, Ujjwal. This gap that I talked about as I started, right? I have been talking to a couple of my customers, and this problem continues to exist, right? And it's not like it is a new problem. It is a problem, but it has amplified a lot, right? As the volume of data has increased, and as the right, like more and more data is kind of coming our way. Still, it feels like the insights are not always within reach, and there's not that degree of confidence. Just want to hear your perspective of why is that case?
Well, that's a great question. And, I look at it from 2 different angles, right? So one is, just even getting some of your basics right. And, people always talk about it, you know, have we clearly defined what the business problem is? Do we clearly know what the hypothesis we are going to actually use and solve this problem? Then do I have the relevant data? And then the other bit is the data bit, which is also there's a misnomer here that, you have tons of data, but is tons of data good data, or relevant data? So, you could be, yeah, and, people talk about data lakes, etc. Many times they're not lakes anymore. They become swamps. There's irrelevant data that's sitting there. It makes it very difficult for you to actually get the true data that you need for you to solve this problem. So, it's true that there is this gap that exists. Some of it is truly the user led, where they are not able to clearly define what they're looking for, what is the business problem. And then the other bit is, even for you to solve that problem, many times there can be gaps of the data not existing, or it might take you time to even stitch that data together, just because sometimes data is sitting in different systems, or even if you've ingested it into your data lake, they're sitting in their own silos, or getting access to some of that probably can also become a challenge for the data team. So I think it's a little bit of a mishmash of both that leads to this. But I believe the industry is making progress in this space now, where again, your data scientists are also becoming, and data engineers are also becoming, the true business personas, where they are also able to clearly understand and many times help the business users understand or frame the problem as such. So that way, then they can clearly see what data they would need and sort of fill this gap. It's a little bit of a journey. I don't think we are there yet, but I think that the right steps have been taken for us to actually move in that direction.
No, absolutely, and I think those are the things that everybody's kind of tinkering with that, right? And would love to kind of know more about how you guys are dealing with that situation. Rachel, maybe if I can ask you, right? What are some of the things that you guys are doing, right, to kind of address this problem? Because this is a very, very hard problem to solve, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember in the beginning in people analytics when we were really trying to deliver value very quickly for our stakeholders in terms of creating the insights through our solutions very quickly. And of course, what happened is, we had data scientists bringing the data in, also playing the role of data engineers, bringing the data in that was very specific for their product. And then lo and behold, before we knew it, it becomes this case of one product has this data and then another product would like to use that data, but because that data was built for that specific product, it can't really be used for another product. So think of that, times 50 to 100 times over. And then you've got that situation that you talked about in the beginning, Sachin, which is now the data is somewhat unusable and there's that chasm. So it does boil down to blueprinting what a scalable and sustainable ecosystem looks like for data as an asset and how it can be used along an entire analytics product lifecycle. So one of the things that we've done here, and it's still obviously a work in progress as we continue to evolve it over the years, is we've set up our data engineering processes. So that's something that is, followed by our teams. We have the right capabilities and the roles aligned with that to bring in the data from ingestion and transform it all the way through. So just setting that up in and of itself really helps us to, unlock, data. At the same time, too, there has to be data governance over it. So when there's many engineers that are working on bringing in this data, there has to be a role, there has to be people that are looking at that and seeing, oh, is that data perhaps something that can be reused? Is it commonly being ingested? Are we creating those redundancies in our data such that that's pretty inefficient and then will lead to different interpretations of the data? So having a governance role over that and being able to spot where we can make data reusable is another big aspect, I think, of, filling that chasm that you're talking about.
No, absolutely. I think what really resonated with me was this point about building a scalable and sustainable ecosystem, right? I think that is key to kind of make sure that you're not solving only for today, but what you're solving for, right, serves you well, right, for perpetuity. And that's a very, very tall order. Let me double click on some of the pieces that you're mentioning, Rachel, right, especially around this data ecosystem. What are some of the key dimensions of this data ecosystem that you're referring to? If you can explain that a little bit more for our listeners, that would be great.
Sure. I'm hoping that something that resonates with the audience is the concept of data reusability.
Absolutely.
So, again, how is it that in order to solve the problems that we're looking to solve for with the data, do we have many different versions of the data all over the place? So there is that concept of, think of it as, you can even think of it in terms of the environment, right? How you're recycling or you're reusing things. And then that allows it to be standard and common across. So one of the things we've done in our evolution is we started off with turning the product specific data into what we called reusable data sets. So I think that that's a big component of a data ecosystem that's needed for analytics. The second piece of that is, are you able to govern over that, which I've mentioned before?
Yeah.
And the technology has come a long way. in the space where there's many different tech enablers that can help you govern the data. And so that's another component of an ecosystem to put into place is, so if you have the people that can do the data governance, is there a way that they can use a technology that's applied on top of your data to allow that to be easier to govern? And also for the users of your data. So all of the engineers and the data scientists that are in our ecosystem, they have to be able to obtain knowledge of what the data is very quickly. Imagine a world that we have today where we have many different product teams or project teams working on data. It's either net new data that we've ingested and or newer teams that are coming in for a specific period of time to work on a particular project with our data. They have to be able to know what data exists very easily and very quickly. They also have to know what are the definitions and the lineage of that data so that they can understand, again, is it going to help them solve their problem? So I think another aspect of an ecosystem is that tech enabler, but also, the way for people that are working in the ecosystem to understand the data quicker.
Got it. I think that data understanding and the data literacy, right? I think that's very, very crucial. And that leads to, I think, what Ujjwal was referring earlier about your data scientists becoming, right, like the true users and even the business users being able to kind of talk to the data and get the insights directly. So if you have to think of sort of a solution framework, Rachel, right? What are the key components of such a solution would be, right, to kind of realize this kind of vision, right, that you're painting, right? So, for example, some of the things that I have been hearing from some of our customers is that, hey, I think having a common data model could be a great starting point, right? But obviously, that's not enough. So, just wanted to hear, right, as you are solving this for your organization, what are some of these key solution levers that you are pulling, right? And what are your learnings?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started this journey, I actually started very much with and again, I hope this resonates with the audience, very much with the theory. So I had a conceptual data model and a logical data model that I had built out for people data. And that's one of the first things that I worked on in my role and in this function. And lo and behold, it actually wasn't that useful for us in the beginning because we needed to deliver products that were solving very specific problems. Having that conceptual data model wasn't that meaningful. It is now, however, and here's why. Because as we've gone along this journey and we went from very product specific data to then reusable data that was then common and being used across the board by all of the products in a consistent way. Then we ran into the challenge of, while that's great, it's not unified in our data platform in a way that really can allow us to transverse across data as well as transverse it in time. So backwards, historically, in a very easy way. So that's when I felt that a common data model became a critical part of what we needed. So it's great that you're hearing that, Sachin, from your other customers, because I do think that it's when it makes sense for you as an organization, it can really unlock data discovery for your data scientists. And then also for those use cases that require you to cut across the data domains and or specific subdomains of the data and require you to bring that together to have a more holistic package of insights to offer your stakeholders, then that's where I think a common data model is a game changer.
No, absolutely. And I think the point that you are saying, right, that you have to kind of go through that journey and kind of see that, okay, how do we kind of solve for it in a way that it can encompass across all the use cases. Now, one of the other challenges that I have seen is some of these things takes time, right? Like they're just saying that sometimes you have to walk slow to run faster. And at the same time, the business doesn't stop, right? Business has to be given the value here and now. So love to hear your thoughts on how you guys have been able to balance those critical asks from the business to deliver the value now versus building some of this foundational stuff which takes time, right? Ujjwal, right? I'm pretty sure that you would have been in that space where your customers are asking that, that, hey, I want to have that use case now, right? And how do you deal with that?
No, that's a question we get asked almost every hour, if not every day, right? So that's a very, very common theme that we've seen in terms of how do I get access quickly to what we are looking for. I think the way we've approached this from a Mars standpoint is primarily keeping the user in the center and really trying to understand what is it from an empathy and understanding standpoint, what is the goal and the objective that they are really trying to achieve, and how is this analysis or how is the output really going to help them answer that. The reason why we always start with the user at the center, obviously, is because A, we want to understand what the business problem is, but then the intention also is how do we design the solution so that it's very easy for the user to clearly, navigate through the analysis, get the insights quicker, faster, and they don't have to really, figure out, oh, what drop down do I have to do or what filter do I need to run for me to get the answer, right? So we always start with the end user in the center and design this. We also follow this principle that we've tried to embed into our operating model, which is build the front end
Mm-hmm.
while the back end starts to catch up, right? And while we start looking at what data is needed, build that whole semantic or contextual layer of bringing that data in, we already have a clear design of what that front end or what the user is really looking for. So that just helps us expedite this whole process, because again, some lessons learned where we always started with, okay, tell me what you want, or here's the data I need, just do this analysis for me. And when we build those kind of products, we've really seen adoption rates are low because the users can't figure out how to navigate, what to do, how do they make the decisions. So some lessons learned from that, which is where then we've turned this around to say, all right, let's bring the user in the center first, understand what they're looking for, and then build the solution really centered around that. So that's the approach that we've taken here at Mars.
Yeah, no, I think that point on the user centricity, while simple, but at times gets missed, right? I have seen it definitely firsthand in many situations. I really like the point that you made about building the front end and let the back end catch up, right? Rachel, I'm pretty sure that mostly you end up with that back end catch up thing, right? Tell me, how do you deal with that?
I do. At time, I think the first time I heard Ujjwal say that is quite controversial to my ears. but it's absolutely spot on, and I'll tell you the benefits of it. And the benefits of it is that a lot building a foundation requires investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very significant investment for your organization, both in terms of money and time, and prioritization. And therefore, it's really important to demonstrate value tied to that investment. And so if you are focusing what you're doing on the foundation on what has been proven successful in terms of the pilots or the solutions that we've put forward, especially with our front end, then it's very easy, I would say, or straightforward to justify the investment that you're making in the foundation. And I think for any executive or leadership team, that's very important to show them that, because I know that many of us live in a world where our analytics functions as well as any other functions, but we all want to demonstrate the value that we're bringing. So I think that's one of the ways that's definitely a big advantage and a benefit of the back end catching up. I think the other advantage, I would say, where the back end catches up is, frankly, it's kind of nice. It gives me time to be thoughtful and mindful and plan
Mm.
and come up with what is that roadmap
Mm-hmm.
that builds the foundation to be scalable in support of what is being driven by our stakeholders and our users in that front end. So, rather than, putting the cart before the horse, I'm able to say, okay, this is what we've seen. This is what's happening. These are the priorities of the business coming through and showing up in our products. Therefore, this is the roadmap that we can do to scale and support that.
Got it. Got it. No, very, very helpful. And again, I think this definitely is something that I'm pretty sure our listeners will also kind of try to practice and take it as a takeaway from this conversation. Let's talk about agents now, right? That's all the buzz right now. And while there has been a lot of excitement about bringing the agentic ecosystem into the play and doing a lot with the external side of the equation. What I mean by that is like maybe optimizing your marketing function, right? Or how you engage with your end consumers and things like that. But there is also a huge space ready and ripe to be disrupted, which is that internal ecosystem, right? Just the way we do things, the way we do our engineering, the way we do kind of manage our data. Love to hear how you guys are leveraging some of these newer constructs, right? Again, in the interest of serving that original goal of bridging the gap between the data and the insight. Rachel, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll come to Ujjwal next.
Sure. So, the buzzwords are all out there. We're all familiar with it. My favorite is the agentic AI framework.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why it's my favorite, because I hate black boxes, I hate hype words, and I love digging into it and figuring out what's in that black box.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out what's in that black box behind agentic AI framework. And I think that's really important is anytime you're presented with the hype or the buzzwords, I think what we owe ourselves as data professionals is to get behind that and really understand it. So break it into the different components and educate ourselves and make sure that we know everything about it. And with the right partners that are partnering with you, you can do that. I think the important pieces that we learned in the past year to really double down and focus on in terms of our education and our capability build, and also, turning that black box into something that I know every single component and have and am able to establish some visibility into.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's several pieces. One is the context layer.
Mm-hmm.
So it became extremely important last year when we were enabling AI for BI, so conversational AI, to understand what is the role of the context layer and how important context is in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the design principles that I made sure, which we've always done along our journey here in this function, is what do we need to set up in order to make that happen. So in this case, the context layer, what does that look like? And so that's where it's really important, I think, to have a technical blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure from an architecture standpoint, you have the very detailed technical blueprint that can explain that to you, and you can also explain it to others. And then that way, again, you don't have this black box. So the context layer was a big piece. The second is the prompt engineering. So everybody talks about it, but it's really important to know what's going on in that prompt. So to have that full visibility, and I think you have to focus in on the mechanisms to show you that and make that visible all the time. And do you have the roles and capabilities within your team? Do you have the right technical skills as well as functional skills to understand what's going into the prompt?
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to validate that what is then returned from that prompt is actually in line with what you're expecting? So I think that's the second component. And then the third is getting back to the agentic AI framework. And I'll tie it back to what was covered, I think, earlier in the podcast about the personas. It became very clear to me that in order to get the right responses or I would say the suitable responses or the appropriate responses to the questions that we were asking of the conversational AI is you really need to first start off with the persona. Who is the persona that is asking the question? And then that way, the agentic AI framework that you have with the orchestrator and the different agents that are brought into play with that orchestrator, that it's able to focus in on the persona and deliver the appropriate responses, because there's a path that has to be followed. But in order to follow the path, we have to say, okay, it's the path for this persona or that
Got
persona. So those, I think, are the three things that I learned last year that are really important aspects of this. And so that has to be set up to be scalable, repeatable, dependable in order to have an AI-ready data platform.
No, wonderful, wonderful. In fact, this piece around persona really resonated with me because it dovetails into what Ujjwal was saying earlier, that you're not putting that end user into the center and designing everything around that, right? Ujjwal, anything to add from your side on how you guys are leveraging agents and the whole agentic paradigm, right? To
Yeah,
transform data story?
absolutely. So, you heard Rachel speak more about the fundamentals and the workflow designs, that really happen at the back end, right? But to an end user, what the end user is really looking for is the AI elevator. They don't, a lot of the end users really don't understand the fundamentals of getting the right data in, having the right workflow, etc. Right? But as an end user, I think what users need to also really understand is the AI truly able to give me or shine light on questions that I myself as a user haven't thought of? Because many times, as when we talk about personas, also many times, it's like everybody is so has their blinders on, if I may use that as an example to say, if I'm responsible for talent acquisition, as an example, I'm only going to think about talent acquisition. But the beauty of bringing in, the common data model and the whole agentic framework is now saying, let's not just look at talent acquisition, because talent acquisition is just one part of it. But can the orchestrator actually give me leading or lagging indicators that might be relevant for me as a persona, but I'm probably not even asking that question because I'm only looking at talent acquisition as an example. But a classic example could be turnover has direct implications on talent acquisition. But if you really look at a talent acquisition manager, they never ask questions around turnover, right? They're all worried about, all right, how many new recs are coming in? What is my time to hire? How quickly can I actually, fulfill those requirements? But if I get these leading indicators, and I'm calling turnover as a leading indicator because turnover leads to a demand in acquisition. So if I already know who's going to leave, or what my turnover is going to look like, I can actually start prepping my TA team to say, all right, these are the roles that I would want to fill in. And really, that's where the whole AI solutions really need to come to life through the agentic framework, by saying, don't look at it purely based on the blinders on of looking at only what's relevant for you, but there could be other aspects that are having an influence on what's relevant for you as well. And I think that's really what we are trying to bring through life here, which is to look at the entire ecosystem. Again, not just what's relevant for one persona, but then what can influence that persona as well. And that's where the whole power and the beauty of AI really comes to life.
That's actually very, very profound, Ujjwal, right? Because I think as you were speaking, I was just thinking through that it's not about having a point in time insight, right? But looking at the persona, it's in entirety and on its adjacencies, right? And then through that, right, trying to find the insights at the intersections, if you will, right?
Correct. Yep.
I think that's actually very, very profound, because I don't think people always look at the data and the insights that way, right? And maybe using some of these newer construct, right, they can actually stitch that together, and that could be very, very powerful.
Exactly. Which is again user led, bringing the user in the center, and in some ways forcing them because it can be a very uncomfortable conversation for some of those users because you're kind of asking them to think through what and how and all of that, and that can be a little bit intimidating for them because they've never been in those kind of situations in the past, right? So I think that's where the whole paradigm is shifting as well.
Got it. Wonderful, wonderful. A small plug from Tiger Analytics here, because we are talking so much about the personas, and as our audience is also hearing, right, the personas are really at the center of realizing this kind of solves. We do have a solution called Zero Shot Profiler. The idea of this Zero Shot Profiler is that for any persona within the organization, right, it can very quickly create a full profile of what are the kind of questions that persona need to ask, what are the kind of decisions that the persona needs to make, what are the kind of data element that persona needs to look at, right? What are the kind of insight that they need to kind of review on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right? This is being achieved through a curation of our understanding of the marketplace and designing several solutions over time. If any of our listeners are interested in knowing more about that, they can always reach out to Tiger Analytics, and we'll be happy to kind of do a demo. Well, coming back to the podcast, right? Ujjwal, I think one of the things that we didn't touch upon yet, but I do believe that's very, very important, is that building any of these solutions, right? The adoption is the biggest challenge, right? I was reading one of the stats that only 2 out of 10, right, implementations, right, of this magnitude actually see the end of the light. And the reason for that is adoption is very low. What challenges have you anticipated or anticipating, right, from the adoption perspective as you are kind of going through your data journey? And what are you doing to address those?
Yeah, I think, again, adoption, if you really start looking at how or why adoption starts failing, right? I think there are a few reasons that we've seen in the past, right? Number one, sometimes from an engineering, data science, or solutioning perspective, we get so caught up in what we are building that we might, because we live and breathe that, we find it very easy to navigate through the solution. But a brand new user who's probably not as technically savvy as the development team would be struggles with it, right? So it becomes very, very difficult for them to really navigate through a solution. So if I have built a dashboard or a BI product, and the user struggles around what filters do I have to run, what selections do I have to make, it kind of just puts them off in terms of I don't want to use this, it's so complex, it's very difficult for me to even get to the answer that I need. Adoption starts going down, right? So that's one simple thing. Many times the other factor that leads to low adoption is also because of many times I need to make decisions quickly, but if I'm not able to get the data in a timely manner, in an easy to read manner, or if I'm not getting an output quickly and at the right time, again, adoption can be very, very low because business has already moved on. I'm
Yeah, the
solving my
data is
next
there.
problem. It's no more, what you're showing me or telling me now is no more relevant because now I'm three problems ahead. So I think that's really where also your adoption starts diminishing it to a great extent. And then again, the last bit also is making sure, and I know Rachel touched about on this as one of her roles and responsibilities is to ensure how do I trust what I'm getting is actually right, right? So from a data quality and the accuracy of the data, I think it is very, very important also because again, these are foundational things, but many times a lot of analytics teams actually struggle to give the right data, which is clean, usable, and something that the end user can trust, right? So trust leads to adoption. So I think these are things that you want to be very, very clear about. And then obviously with the advent of AI now, there's also a lot of can I actually get insights generated through, tools like generative AI? So it helps me to really just fine tune that and act and take action on it, rather than, me, trying to run through all the filters, etc., interpreting what the charts, etc., look like, and then, all right, glean those insights out and then give that to the business. By that time, again, there's a lot of time that's gone by. If I can quickly get a lot of those actionable insights, through new tech, I think that just leads to higher adoption as well. Because the users are getting a lot of it, curated freely and easily for them with the right business context and the contextualization, and it makes it easy, and higher adaptability starts coming in. So these are things that we've learned. I'm sure there are more, and every organization has their own DNA, and their own ways of working, and challenges that they face with adoption. But these are some that we've seen here at Mars, and that's how we've kind of learned through that, and are trying to mitigate some of it.
If I could just add a build to that,
Sure,
on
Rachel.
of trust and adoption, I'll offer a counter viewpoint, which is when it comes to data that is sensitive
Mm-hmm.
and or highly confidential, there could be a challenge in users trusting that they can put this data to an LLM
Mm-hmm.
to generate content. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a very real problem today, because one of the things that we pride ourselves on is the ability, from a data governance perspective, as well as being in people analytics, is really putting first and foremost the protection of the data.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to sensitive data, I think it's important, and this is probably one of the things that I should have called out when I
Mm-hmm.
talked about what it will take to have an AI ready data platform, or AI ready analytics
Mm-hmm.
um, ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
That before you actually give the data over to the LLM, do you
Mm-hmm.
have mechanisms in place to protect the data that you are providing? And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's an important concept or principle that
Mm-hmm.
kept in mind. At least consider it as
Mm-hmm.
part of your practice in this space. So, it's important from a trust standpoint, because I people are, our employees are entrusting us, our
Yeah.
associates are entrusting us with the data. We all have a responsibility, and
Mm-hmm.
so therefore, what are the mechanisms that we should be and can and would and will or
Mm-hmm.
have put into place to actually protect it in this world of Gen AI? Because everything's moving so fast, and
Right.
there's a lot of hype out there. So it's always best to take a pause and figure out, do you have security in place? Do you have the guardrails in place? Are you
Mm-hmm.
protecting the data as much as possible?
No, absolutely. And I think trust is one of the fundamental aspect, right? That if not tackled right, can actually lead to a very poor adoption, as usually you highlighted. And Rachel, I think rightly so, especially in the space of people analytics, people and organization, right, that you guys are leading. It's doubly important, right, to make sure that you are very, very protective of the data that you deal with. Great conversation so far. I think some of the things that I was just noting down, right? I think, and couple of great takeaways, right? Like the way I was thinking about, if we have to bring a solution that addresses some of these problems, right? I think user centricity is the key. I think that is one thing that's coming very, very loudly from both of you. And then kind of working on having a common data model that can ensure that you're not only looking at the point problems and the point use cases, but you are being able to look at the overall arc, right, from end to end, and being able to kind of identify insights at the cusp, if you will. And then also kind of building that context-rich data set, right, giving it as much context as possible, so that your agents can actually find meaningful, right, data and the insights from them and serve the customer. And then lastly, having a good semantic layer, right, that can kind of allow a good understanding of the data that can then lead to better solution overall. There's some point that I noted, and again, I think I'm pretty sure our listeners have noted as well. But as we look to kind of close out the conversation, right? Maybe Ujjwal, if you can share what is the guidance that you'll give to those organizations which are starting this journey, right? Just now, right? Where and how they should kind of pursue this pathway, and what are some of the key fundamentals that they should keep an eye on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, again, I think, there's no silver bullet to it, honestly. Every organization, as I mentioned earlier, has their own DNA and their own, evolution that, they have to go through. With someone who's starting new, I think, obviously, having the right type of people is important, right? In terms of the technical capability, the functional capability, the ability for them to, truly understand the business and have a grip of it is very, very important. The second is obviously keeping and having your problem statement clearly, truly defined and identified. Many times, we spend more time on the problem statement and the definition of the problem statement than actual the solution development. And the reason is the problem statement definition makes it very easy for us to actually then identify the solution around it. So spend more time on the problem statement. It helps you get more clarity and forces the business also a little bit in terms of thinking through what they're asking for. Have empathy with the end users. I think that's very, very important in terms of just gleaning more information out from a data team perspective. Obviously, again, there are tools, capabilities, technology that's available. Again, identify, and that's where you need the right skills, where you can identify the right tools, and you're not trying to, again, trying to kill an ant with a cannon. You could just bring a fly swatter and kill the ant, right? So again, that's really where you have to be very, very careful in terms of what tool you're using and how. The last bit, which is very, very important, is also around the storytelling bit. And I know we didn't talk about this, but it's also very important is how do I, once I built a solution, how do I actually tell that story? How do I actually make the users clearly understand what the solution is, how it's really going to help them, and how they need to apply it as well? Many times, you really, or I've seen a lot of projects actually fail because of not having the right story told. People have built the best, analytical solutions, best AI models, but they failed because they've not been able to clearly contextualize and explain that to the end business user. And the end business users are not the statistical technical capable people in many cases, and they struggle. And that's why the ability for you to tell that story in a cohesive and easy to understand manner is very, very important, so that the user clearly knows what and how to use those tools. So again, these are things that anybody starting new or in their journey, I'm sure everybody might be in the journey as well. I'm sure they can take a lot of this and bring your own flavor to it as well. Like I said, there's no silver bullet. Try, experiment. Some things will work, some things won't. And you then can clearly find your sweet spot and figure out this works best in our ecosystem, and then just double down on it and scale it. So that's really where I would recommend how organizations should approach this.
Awesome. No, I think for me, the biggest takeaway was really the point around storytelling, because one of the things that I see is that many times focus a lot more on the technology constructs. But the thing is that the ability to tell a good story, right, goes a long way. And data always have to tell a story. Otherwise, there's not really a place for data, right? Exactly. And that perhaps is a great note to kind of bridge that gap between the data and the insight, that if we can make the data tell a good story, that good story becomes the insight that the people can then act on.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Well, this was great talking to both you, Ujjwal and Rachel. Thanks for your time. And we're looking forward to kind of collaborate further.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone.